The glass walls of the HR conference room reflected the pale morning light, casting sharp patterns across the table. I sat at one end, calm, composed, while across from me, the HR manager and my direct supervisor exchanged that rehearsed corporate expression. Sympathetic eyes, tight lips, and a voice carefully tuned to sound regretful. "Miranda," the HR manager began, sliding a crisp folder across the table. "We've discovered your second job." For a moment, I didn't move. My pulse didn't even quicken. I'd known this was coming, just not this soon. "Our internal compliance team found external employment records," she continued, voice steady but cold. "It's a clear violation of your contract." "You've been working elsewhere while employed here." Beside her, my manager, Eric, crossed his arms and leaned back, pretending to look disappointed. "You know we have a zero-tolerance policy for this sort of thing." I nodded once, silently. "We'll need your signature here," HR said, pushing the termination letter toward me. "Your employment is terminated, effective immediately." I took the pen without hesitation. The silence stretched between us, heavy and expectant. They wanted me to fight back, to protest, to beg, to explain. But instead, I smiled, signed my name in calm, deliberate strokes, and placed the pen back on the table. Then I looked up at them and said, "Good. Then I can finally focus on one." Eric's brow furrowed. HR blinked. They didn't understand. Not yet. "What do you mean by that?" HR asked, her tone slipping from professional to cautious curiosity. "Exactly what I said," I replied. "One job." I stood, smoothed my blazer, and pushed the folder back across the table. "Thank you for the opportunity." They watched me walk out, expecting a meltdown, maybe even tears. Instead, I gave them a polite nod, as if I'd just finished a routine meeting. They had no idea what my second job really was. As the security guard escorted me to my desk, my colleagues whispered behind their monitors. No one asked questions out loud, but I could feel the weight of their stares. In the sterile world of corporate finance, gossip traveled faster than data. "Did you hear?" HR caught her moonlighting. Someone murmured, "Can you believe it?" She seemed so dedicated I ignored them all, packing my few personal belongings into a small box. My favorite ceramic mug, a notebook filled with sketches of process maps, a framed photo of my mother. The guard didn't say a word as he walked me through the lobby. He just pressed the elevator button and stared ahead. When the doors opened to the bright morning outside, the spring air felt cleaner than it had in years. I took a deep breath. Freedom. Not the kind they thought they were giving me, but the kind I'd been waiting for. 2 years ago, when I joined Harmon and Vexler Financial, I believed I'd finally made it. Stable salary, corner office, a future that looked promising. I worked late nights, fixed others' mistakes, trained new hires. When the firm's client database nearly crashed, I stayed up for 48 hours to save it. The partners thanked me publicly at the next staff meeting. "Miranda's dedication is unmatched," they said. 2 weeks later, Eric, my manager, took the credit in front of a client and earned himself a promotion. That was the first time I understood how things really worked there. I stayed silent, smiled, and kept working. But quietly, I started preparing. My second job wasn't with another employer. It wasn't moonlighting at all. It was the business I'd been building from my own designs. Software that streamlined financial auditing, the very system Harmon and Vexler depended on but refused to modernize. When I'd pitched the idea to them 18 months ago, they'd laughed. "It's too ambitious," Eric said. "Stick to your job description." So I did, at least on paper. In reality, my evenings became something else entirely. I spent countless nights coding, testing, improving until my software was functional enough to quietly license to small firms. By the time HR called me in, 10 of those firms were already using it under a different name, LumaTrack Systems. My second job was the company that was about to change my entire life. When I reached my car, my phone buzzed. A single text lit up the screen. From Daniel, LumaTrack co-founder. "Client demo confirmed. 2 p.m. sharp. I typed back, "I'll be there. Just got free earlier than expected." For a long moment, I just sat there, watching the Harmon and Wexler tower through the windshield. Behind those glass walls, they probably thought they'd rid themselves of a liability. They had no idea what was coming, because in exactly 2 days, their biggest client would be sitting across the table from me, at my demo, under my new company's banner. And when that meeting was over, Harmon and Wexler would realize just how expensive their mistake had been. The rain began that afternoon, fine needles against my windshield as I pulled out of Harmon and Wexler's parking lot for the last time. I didn't look back. There was no reason to. Everything that had defined my professional life for the past 4 years was behind those mirrored windows. Stress, underappreciation, and the illusion of security. I drove straight to the co-working space downtown, the one where I'd spent my nights and weekends over the past year. The walls were plastered with startup posters and motivational quotes, but to me, it had always felt more like a lifeboat than an office. Daniel was already there, sitting at our usual corner desk, laptop open, coffee cup steaming beside him. He looked up as I walked in. "You're early," he said, then paused when he saw my face. "Wait, did it happen?" I set the cardboard box of my belongings down beside the desk. "They found out," I said simply. He grinned, half shocked, half exhilarated. "So that's it? You're free?" I let out a small laugh. Free, unemployed, and slightly terrified. Daniel leaned back, folding his arms. "Miranda, you've been doing their job and ours for a year. You've built something that's already earning revenue. You're not unemployed. You just switched companies." His optimism had always balanced my realism. Daniel was a systems analyst I'd met years ago at a finance tech seminar. He'd left corporate life early after watching his department dissolve during a merger. When I told him about the inefficiencies at Harmon and Wexler, he'd said, "Then build something better. I'll help." That was how LumaTrack Systems was born. 2 people with laptops, too much caffeine, and a shared frustration with bureaucracy. It started as a side project, almost therapy. I was drowning in spreadsheets, manual reconciliations, and outdated systems at work. Our auditing software was so archaic that every client report required hours of redundant verification. When I proposed automation, management dismissed it as unnecessary complexity. But I knew better. I saw how much time was being wasted, how errors were creeping in. So I began coding after hours, testing automation scripts on anonymized data. Slowly, what began as a few simple macros evolved into a full-fledged auditing intelligence platform. Daniel joined in on weekends, building the user interface and client dashboard. We worked quietly, cautiously, never from company resources, never during paid hours. We kept everything clean, legally, ethically, perfectly separate. By the time we registered LumaTrack officially, it wasn't just an idea. It was a product. Our early clients were small accounting firms, frustrated with the same inefficiencies I'd been fighting. They didn't have big budgets, but they had faith. And when the system caught its first major discrepancy, a missing $300,000 transaction error in one client's records, it paid for itself overnight. Within months, word spread. 10 firms signed up. Revenue trickled in, modest but steady. Daniel handled contracts, I handled technology. We worked quietly, intentionally invisible. Then last week, everything changed. One of Harmon and Wexler's biggest clients, Borealis Capital, reached out to LumaTrack for a demonstration. They'd heard of us through a smaller partner firm and wanted to see how our system handled real-time auditing. Daniel's email had been almost disbelieving. "They don't know it's you, right?" Of course they didn't. I had presented myself as M. Lane in all external communications. Professional, efficient, anonymous. But the moment they confirmed the meeting, I'd known exposure was inevitable. Still, I didn't care. If Harmon and Wexler wanted to fire me, they'd just freed me to walk into that meeting without a single ethical restraint. Now, sitting in our small shared office, I opened my laptop and scrolled through the presentation. The system interface glowed softly, a design I'd built line by line, every piece of logic refined through years of frustration. Daniel glanced over my shoulder. You sure about this? I nodded. Borealis deserves better. We gave them better. If Harmon and Wexler couldn't value that, it's not my problem anymore. He hesitated, then smiled. Then let's make tomorrow count. That night I couldn't sleep. Not because of fear, but because of the surreal stillness that comes after years of tension. My mind kept replaying scenes. Eric taking credit for my work. HR's careful condescension. The smug look on Finn's face when I trained him only for him to be promoted over me. I thought of the irony. They'd accused me of betraying the company, when all I'd done was build something that could have saved it. Around 3 a.m., I got up, poured a glass of water, and sat by the window. The city lights shimmered through the rain. Somewhere out there, Harmon and Wexler's servers were grinding through month-end reports using outdated systems I had begged them to replace. Meanwhile, my software, my second job, was ready to automate it all with precision they couldn't dream of. At 8:30 the next morning, my phone buzzed. Daniel. Demo confirmed for 2 p.m. Borealis bringing their CFO. I smiled, a slow, quiet satisfaction spreading through me. By noon, I'd changed into a dark blue suit, the same one I used to wear to board meetings. This time, though, it wasn't for someone else's company. When I arrived at the co-working office, Daniel was setting up the presentation. Nervous? He asked. Only a little, I said, plugging in my laptop. It's funny. They thought they caught me cheating the system. He looked up. And? I met his eyes. They never realized I was building a better one. At exactly 2 p.m., Borealis Capital's CFO walked in. She shook my hand firmly, unaware she was meeting the person Harmon and Wexler had just fired. As I began the demo, explaining how Lumitrak's architecture could reduce their audit time by 70%, I felt the weight of years lifting. Every line of code, every dismissed idea, every ignored suggestion, it all led here. And when the CFO leaned forward, eyes widening at the live analytics dashboard, I knew. 2 days from now, when she made her decision, Harmon and Wexler's biggest client wouldn't be theirs anymore. It would be mine. The conference room at the co-working space smelled faintly of coffee and printer ink. Our logo, Lumitrak Systems, flickered on the wall-mounted screen, simple and professional. Daniel adjusted the projector one last time while I checked the presentation slides on my laptop. Everything was ready. When Borealis Capital's team entered, their energy filled the room instantly. Sharp suits, crisp handshakes, a mix of curiosity and fatigue. They'd spent months fighting through Harmon and Wexler's outdated systems, and it showed. Thank you for meeting us on short notice, said the CFO, a composed woman in her 40s named Margaret Price. Her voice carried the calm authority of someone used to having every answer. We've heard about your software from 2 of our partner firms. They claim it's changed their workflow entirely. I smiled. We like to think we make complexity simple. She nodded, taking a seat. Then let's see what you've built. I clicked to the first slide. On the screen, datasets appeared. Columns of anonymized financial entries that shifted as the system ran. Lumitrak automates the reconciliation process by identifying irregularities in real time, I began. Where traditional audits depend on manual cross-referencing, our AI-assisted model identifies anomalies across multiple ledgers simultaneously. Margaret leaned forward slightly. And this works with existing infrastructures? Yes, I said. That's what makes it different. We designed it to integrate with legacy systems instead of replacing them. Daniel chimed in. Implementation usually takes less than 48 hours. You won't have to rebuild your data architecture. Her eyebrows lifted. 48 hours? I nodded. We've done it 10 times already. The demo continued for nearly an hour. I walked them through every function. The live error tracking, instant verification dashboard, automated audit trail. Each question from Borealis's team was met with evidence, data, and examples. And with each answer, their skepticism softened into interest. Then I clicked to the final slide. "Here's a live simulation," I said, opening a secure demo environment. "Let's run your sample data." Margaret handed me a flash drive. "This includes anonymized files from our last quarter's records." "Show us what you can do." I inserted the drive, loaded the data, and pressed run. For 30 seconds, the room was silent except for the faint hum of the laptop. Then the dashboard populated, highlighting discrepancies across multiple divisions. A red flag appeared beside an entry marked Asset Transfer Division 3. Margaret frowned. "Wait, that's not supposed to be there." I clicked on the flagged item. This transfer was logged twice. Once as an internal reallocation, once as a new asset acquisition. The system recognized it as a potential duplication worth $1.4 million. Her jaw tightened. "We missed that in our manual audit." "It's easy to miss," I said gently. "Your previous system doesn't cross-verify subledgers." Luma retracted as she exchanged a look with her deputy. The atmosphere shifted. The cautious curiosity now replaced by alert, impressed focus. When the simulation ended, Margaret turned to her team. "This is cleaner than anything we've seen in months." I felt Daniel's glance, but I kept my composure. "That's what we aim for," I said. After a few more questions, the meeting wrapped up. Margaret stood, shaking my hand again. "I'd like a full proposal on my desk by tomorrow morning," she said. "Our board meets Friday. If your numbers make sense, we'll make a decision then." "Of course," I said. "We'll have it ready." As they left, Daniel let out a low whistle. "Did you see her face when the flag came up?" "Hard to miss," I said, closing my laptop. My hands were steady, but my heartbeat wasn't. "They're going to drop Harmon and Vexler, aren't they?" I looked out the window, where the rain had finally stopped and sunlight hit the pavement like liquid gold. "If I were them," I said softly, "I would." That night, we worked until nearly midnight drafting the proposal. Daniel handled the pricing structure, while I wrote the technical integration plan. Every sentence felt like drawing a line between two lives, the one that had ended and the one just beginning. At one point, Daniel looked up from his laptop. "You know, when you said you had a second job, this isn't what I imagined." I smiled. Neither did they. "Do you ever feel guilty?" he asked quietly. "About leaving them behind?" I paused. I tried to fix things there for years. I sent reports, built prototypes, made presentations. They ignored every one of them. If they're struggling now, it's because they chose not to listen. He nodded. "Then this is justice." "Not justice," I corrected. "Balance." The next morning, I woke before sunrise. The city was quiet, washed clean from the night's rain. I brewed coffee and sat at my kitchen table, reviewing the final draft. Every figure, every explanation, every sentence mattered. At 8:47 a.m., I clicked send. The proposal to Borealis Capital was gone. My old employer's largest account was now one decision away from leaving them for me. I leaned back, exhaling slowly. Years of exhaustion and humiliation condensed into one sharp, exhilarating moment of peace. At noon, my phone buzzed with a new email notification. From Margaret Price. I opened it immediately. "Thank you for the presentation, Miranda." The board was impressed. "We're evaluating terms and will reach a decision within 48 hours. 48 hours. 2 days. I reread the message twice before setting my phone down. 2 days from now, the same people who had called me a liability would realize the truth. My second job wasn't competition. It was evolution, and they'd fired the very person who could have led them into the future. I thought of Eric, sitting in his office, probably bragging about how he'd handled the Miranda situation. I imagined his face when Borealis called to terminate their contract. The irony would be perfect. I smiled, finished my coffee, and whispered to the empty apartment. Tick-tock. The countdown had begun. The next 2 days moved in slow motion, like the quiet before a storm. Every hour felt heavier than the one before. The email from Borealis sat pinned at the top of my inbox, and though I told myself to stay calm, I couldn't stop checking for updates. By Wednesday morning, 24 hours had passed since the demo. Daniel and I were back at the co-working space, laptops open, pretending to focus on smaller client requests. But we both knew our attention was elsewhere. At 9:10 a.m., Daniel broke the silence. "You think they've already decided?" I looked up from my screen. "If they have, we'll hear soon. The board meets this afternoon." He nodded but kept tapping his pen. "You realize if Borealis signs, everything changes. We'll need staff, infrastructure, full-time support." "I know," I said. "It's strange. For years, I fought to prove my worth to people who never cared. Now I might have to prove it to myself." He smiled faintly. "You already did." By lunchtime, my nerves were thin. I went for a walk downtown, letting the early spring air clear my head. The city felt alive. People in suits rushing to lunch meetings, students laughing by cafe windows, construction sounds echoing between buildings. For the first time in months, I wasn't running late or under pressure. I was simply waiting for a decision that could rewrite my life. When I returned to the office, Daniel was standing by the window, phone in hand, face unreadable. "Who is that?" I asked. He turned slowly, eyes wide. "Borealis. They called me directly." My stomach tightened. "And?" He grinned. "They're in. Full contract. They're moving their entire auditing division to Lumatrack. Effective immediately." For a few seconds, I couldn't speak. The words hung in the air, echoing between us. Then a wave of relief hit me so strongly I had to sit down. "They really signed?" "They did more than that," Daniel said, excitement breaking through. "They want a long-term partnership. 2-year renewable agreement, and they want you to lead the transition personally." I laughed, half from shock, half from disbelief. "They don't even realize what this means for Harmon and Wexler." "Oh, they'll find out," Daniel said, leaning against the desk. "Losing Borealis will cost them millions, maybe more." The irony felt surreal, fired for having a second job, and now that job had just dismantled the company that fired me. That evening, I went home and sat in silence for a long time. The city lights glowed outside my window, but my thoughts were far away. Back in that glass conference room, watching Eric's smug expression as he handed me the termination letter. I'd spent 4 years giving everything to a company that treated me like a replaceable part. They'd taken my loyalty for granted, my work for credit, my silence for submission. But they'd never once tried to understand what I was capable of. Now they would. At 8 p.m., my phone buzzed. Unknown number. "Miranda?" The voice stopped me cold. "Eric, how did you get this number?" I asked, keeping my tone even. "Doesn't matter," he said quickly. His voice was strained, the polished arrogance replaced by something else. Panic. "I need to ask, did you take Borealis?" I didn't answer immediately. "Take?" I repeated. "They made a business decision." "You don't understand," he said, his words tumbling over each other. "Borealis was 30% of our revenue. They've terminated their contract. The partners are furious. They think you—" "I what?" I said calmly. "That you planned this. That you used your position to poach them." I almost laughed. "Eric, you fired me for having a second job, remember?" "I didn't take anything from you. You gave it away." He was silent. I could hear muffled voices in the background, the sound of chaos. Exactly the kind of chaos he used to delegate to me to clean up. "I tried to warn them," he said finally, "about cutting corners, about how much we relied on your work. But they didn't listen." I leaned back in my chair. "You mean the same way they didn't listen to me?" He didn't answer. "Good luck, Eric," I said softly. "Maybe now they'll finally see what happens when you underestimate the people who hold everything together." And then I hung up. The next morning, my phone lit up again, this time with headlines. Harmon and Wexler faces client exodus after major contract loss. Borealis Capital moves to innovative auditing startup. Underneath the article, a single photo, the familiar glass building I'd walked out of just 2 days ago. I stared at it for a long moment, emotions twisting between satisfaction and sadness. I hadn't wanted destruction. I'd only wanted recognition. But sometimes those two things arrive hand in hand. At noon, Daniel called. "Our inbox is exploding," he said. 3 new inquiries from firms asking for demos. Apparently word travels fast. I smiled, unable to stop the rush of warmth in my chest. It's only the beginning. Still, part of me couldn't help but wonder what was happening inside that building right now. The same people who dismissed me, whispering about my betrayal, were probably scrambling to recover. It wasn't revenge exactly. It was balance. The same balance I'd mentioned to Daniel before. They had taken too much from too many for too long. Now the scales were simply leveling themselves. I looked out at the skyline, the afternoon sun reflecting off 1,000 windows, and felt something I hadn't felt in years. Peace. But I knew the story wasn't over yet. Because when you build something powerful enough to change an industry, people notice. And sometimes the ones who notice first are the ones who want it back. By Friday morning, the air in the co-working space buzzed with quiet disbelief. Overnight, 3 more companies had reached out for demos, each citing the same phrase. "We heard what happened with Borealis." Daniel walked in holding 2 coffees and a newspaper folded under his arm. "Front page," he said, dropping it onto my desk. The headline read, "Former employee's startup overtakes her previous firm in landmark deal." Below it, a photo of me from the Borealis demo, standing by the presentation screen, smiling slightly, unaware someone had captured the moment. My old employer's logo blurred faintly in the reflection behind me. I stared at it for a long time. "That's surreal," I murmured. "You earned it," Daniel said. "They underestimated you, and now the world knows it." Still, I felt a strange mix of pride and melancholy. Vindication rarely arrives without a hint of loss. I hadn't built Lumitrack to destroy anyone. I'd built it because I believed in something better. Harmon and Wexler had just refused to see it. By noon, our inbox overflowed with partnership requests. One email caught my eye. Subject line, "Meeting request from Harmon and Wexler Executive Office." For a moment, I just stared at it. Then I opened it. "Miranda, this is Robert Lang, Managing Partner. I'd appreciate the chance to speak with you privately regarding possible collaboration. Please let me know your availability this afternoon." Collaboration. The word almost made me laugh. Daniel glanced over my shoulder. "You're not seriously considering meeting them, are you?" "I don't know," I said quietly. "Maybe I need to hear what they have to say." At 3 p.m., I walked into a downtown cafe halfway between our office and theirs. Robert was already seated in the corner booth, immaculate as ever in his tailored suit, but his posture was off. Shoulders slightly hunched, eyes tired. "Miranda," he greeted, forcing a polite smile. "Thank you for meeting me." I sat opposite him. "You said you wanted to talk about collaboration." He nodded slowly. "You've built something remarkable. Losing Borealis hit us hard, but I'll admit, it forced us to reevaluate how we treat our people. The partners. We mishandled things. You were right about the inefficiencies, about everything." Really, his admission landed heavier than I expected. "I tried to warn you," I said, keeping my tone even. Not just once. He looked down at his coffee. "We were blind. And arrogant." Then, glancing up, "We'd like to discuss a potential acquisition of Lumitrack. Or at least a licensing agreement." You named the terms, I almost smiled. "You fired me for having a second job, and now you want to buy it." He sighed. "We made a mistake." For a few seconds, I said nothing. The part of me that had endured years of being overlooked wanted to revel in this moment. To say something cutting, final. But another part, the one that had built Lumitrack from nothing, saw a bigger picture. "Robert, I said finally. I appreciate the offer. But I didn't build this to go back to what I left. We're doing things differently here, valuing people, not just profit. His eyes softened. You're not even going to consider it? I shook my head. You don't need my company. You need change. Start by listening to the people you still have. He exhaled slowly. Then at least allow me to apologize properly for how you were treated. I nodded once. Apology accepted. When I stood to leave, he rose too, extending his hand. Good luck, Miranda. You too, I said. You'll need it. Outside, the late afternoon light washed the city in gold. I walked the few blocks back to our office, my steps steady, unhurried. Inside, Daniel was on a call with a new potential client. He gave me a questioning look, and I mouthed, all good. When he hung up, he grinned. So? They wanted to buy us. He whistled. And you said? No. His grin widened. That's our Miranda. I laughed softly, the tension finally lifting. They'll be fine, I said. Or they won't. Either way, it's not my responsibility anymore. That evening, we gathered the small team we'd recently hired. 5 developers, 1 client manager, 1 data analyst. We ordered takeout and raised paper cups of sparkling water in our cramped little office. To the beginning, Daniel toasted. To second chances, I added. As everyone cheered, I looked around the room. The energy, the laughter, the shared excitement. It felt nothing like the sterile boardrooms I used to sit in. This was real. Later, after everyone left, I stayed behind, gazing out the window at the city skyline. My reflection stared back, tired but alive. I thought about the question HR had asked that morning they fired me. Why risk everything for a second job? The answer was simple now. Because that second job had never been a risk. Staying where I was, that had been the real gamble. I picked up my phone and drafted a short post for LumaTrack's company page. 2 days can change everything. Believe in your work even when others don't. Build quietly. Let results speak louder than explanations. I hit post, turned off the lights, and stood for a moment in the dark. Freedom didn't always come with fanfare. Sometimes it came in the form of a termination letter and a second job no one understood. I smiled, remembering my words in that HR room. Good, I'd said. Then I can finally focus on one. Now, as I locked the office door behind me, I finally knew what that meant. 1 company, 1 purpose, 1 life I built myself.